I've read the incredible 22 books in May. 22 books, and now I want to talk about those books in my monthly wrap-up. Hey, it's Maya, and in this month I've read a total of 22 books, and I wanna talk to you about those books in this video. I've been so confused about which genres I wanna read, so in this month I've chosen a lot of different genres and different books just to see what I like and what I dislike. And I do think it helped because I found a lot of books that I disliked and some that I liked and even loved. So without further ado, because it's gonna be a longer video, let's just go into the list of 22 books that I read this month. The first book that I finished, that I started in April and finished in May, was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. It's an urban adult fantasy novel, first adult novel by Sarah J. Maas, and I read A Court of Thorns and Roses a few months back. I did not like that one, but that one was young adult, so I thought I'd give a try to the adult fantasy novel, and I ended up really disliking it, even hating it in some points. And I even made a rant review, so you can see this is how much I disliked this book. It's set on another planet that is kind of like Earth, but isn't really. That's why the urban fantasy element, because it also has some technology, plus like all of the fantasy elements and creatures that exist in the entire universe. This book has it. It's around 800 pages, and all of those pages are focused on the romance, not the world building. I think this is why I didn't like it so much, because if you're gonna call something fantasy, I expect fantasy, not romance, to be at the center. This was, no, I didn't like it. So yeah, I have a review, let's move on. The next book that I read is one that I DNF'd a few years ago, but I decided to read it again, finish it again in this month, because a lot of people talk about it and it's a series that was revived. So I was like, okay, let's give it a chance. Let's see what people are talking about, why they're raving so much about this trilogy. And it's Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. If I read this in middle school, I would love it and I would probably be like a fan, along with the other people who are fans now who have encountered this book in middle school. However, reading it now, I did not like it. I also think this is one of those dystopian novels that is disguised as dystopian, but in reality is all about the fiery love triangle. It's about this girl who can kill people with her touch, and it's about a love triangle. That's all. Honestly, the main reason why I will not pick up another book in the series is for the writing. That's the main reason. I don't even mind the love triangle that much, as I dislike this flowery, overly written, lyrical writing that's in this book. It's just so bad. Oh my god, it's so bad. Next book I read is about implementing yoga lessons into your everyday life, and it's called Living Your Yoga by Judith Hanson Lasater. Now this book definitely reads like self-help, but it's actually got more depth than your usual self-help book. Writing was pretty simple and straightforward. Messages seemed like they were gonna be cliche, but then the author gives them a twist at the end, and this definitely offered me some perspective on my life and how I caused my own suffering and how we are all causing our own suffering. This is why I loved this book, and I do definitely recommend it. Next book is another one that I raised from the dead. I started reading it in September, and then I DNF'd it, and then I sold it to a second-hand bookshop here in Japan. In May, I was like wanting to read it again, just to see the ending, whether it would change anything. And I had this beautiful hardcover, and I just gave it away to this second-hand bookshop. So I was thinking whether I could go there and ask whether, you know, they still have it, if they're selling it, blah blah. I never did it. I'm still thinking about it, but then again, I gave this book 3 stars, so I'm not sure if it's worth it. But this book is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I liked the protagonist, I liked the gang member, leader, and the writing. I didn't like other characters. They were one-dimensional and the plot was pretty simple and boring. Now, the book is young adult dystopian novel where we have this society who are hunting people with magic. Our protagonist, of course, has this supernatural ability, and then she's caught and taken into this land where some non-humans are using magical humans for their own gain, kind of. And honestly, it's set in London and then it isn't. It's in this other land. If the plot were all in London with this gang, I would love it much more, because I think this gang definitely reminded me of the Six of Crows dynamics, and this gang leader was honestly such a good character. Like, he was so bad, but so good. We love to love bad characters. At least I love this. Anyway, yeah, I finished this book. I will not be finishing the series. But I will give Samantha Shannon another try with her other newer novel, Priory of the Orange Tree. And I also bought it in hardcover because I have no self-control, obviously. The next book that I finished was one of the best books that I read this month and in general, and it's The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. It's magical realism. It's a story about stories where we are following our main protagonist, Zachary. He finds this mysterious book in the library and he sees that one of the stories is a story about his life. And then he goes on to investigate this mysterious book, which leads him to meet more mysterious people and be entangled in even more mystery and secret societies, secret underground libraries, stuff like that. It was very atmospheric, the writing was stunning, there was a lot of metaphors and wide variety of beautiful, memorable characters, which I loved, and Zachary is just a great protagonist, and there were other stories intertangled with the main narrative, and all of those were interesting. I even made a review, and it also inspired my last video, magical realism books that I want to read because of this book, which changed my opinion about magical realism. And really, I will not talk much about it. I think I've said everything more in depth in my review. Just know that this book is amazing and I definitely recommend it. Next up, we have Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. Now, this is a young adult book about this trans boy whose pictures get outed in his high school, pictures before the transformation, and his dead name. So he decides to catfish this other person who he thinks did this to him, to discover a secret of this other person and do the same to them. Honestly, the Goodreads summary is really vague about what this book really is about. And honestly, I did not know it was about catfishing, and the catfishing was never addressed in this book, which is why I did not like this book at all. It was one of the reasons. The other of the reasons were that the writing was simple and just, boring. The main character was so annoying, honestly. He was just jealous of everything and everyone and self-pitying, how judgmental he was of everyone, and this plot with him catfishing this other person, this was so petty and mean, and it was never addressed. And there's this other character who just cracks into other people's phones, and this was also never addressed. Like, privacy? I do think it had some good messages, but even those were just shoved into other characters' mouths, so they would do these monologues in the middle of a conversation, which felt so transparent and unrealistic, and just, this book did not work for me. Next book that I finished was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This book is an adult fantasy, kind of fairy tale-esque, where we have this girl, our protagonist, who is taken to the tower to this magician to be trained as a magician herself. Then other things start happening. The kingdom may go to war, there's a killer forest that takes people, and her and this magician go out to help everyone, basically. The first half of the book, I thought I would give it 5 stars. I loved this enemies to lovers type of relationship that she had with the magician. I loved other characters. I think they were all well done. The writing was beautiful. I thought 5 stars for sure. Second half was so bad that I ended up giving the book overall 3 stars, because in second half they got separated and the plot gets really not high stakes at all, and really you knew that they would save everyone. Honestly, it wasn't even like a question if, they would manage something or not. And the writing was really slow. It slowed down so much and began to be so repetitive. Once I finished this book, I really felt free of this book. This is the feeling that I got. But yeah, I do have to say, like, first half was so beautiful, and I just don't know what happened in the second one. And I'm really sad because this happened. Next we have Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. This is a classic. It's about Buddhism and also a meaning of life. I listened to this on audiobook, so I don't have any notes about it. I really forgot a lot of the things, and I didn't make any notes, so I don't really know which parts I agreed with, which parts I disagreed with, and also I listened to this to help me fall asleep. I do need to reread this book, definitely, and then I will make notes and talk about it more in depth. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was really smart, it was really philosophical, and I do recommend it. Next up we have A Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. This is one of the copies that I actually own, and it's a beautiful copy, first of all. Second of all, this actually brought to Japan with me. It is a adult literary fiction set in a Native American town. We're following this teenage boy who is investigating who raped his mother. Now, I thought this book was gonna be this crime mystery investigation, but in all actuality, the central of this book is just the Native American culture, this boy's life, his relationship with his parents and with his friends and with other people in this town, and judicial system of the US and the Native Americans. Was really interested to read about. I liked this book. I liked finding out more about Native American culture. However, the writing was so dry and unremarkable that I found myself really pushing through some of the passages. This is not a book where you go in it for the ending. It's not about the crime or the mystery. It's about just everyday life. But yeah, I do recommend this book. I think if you're interested in Native American culture and just slice of life, it's definitely for you. However, if you are not interested in that, I think you would be bored with this book. The next book that I read is actually a romance novel, which I said I want to try new genres to see what interests me. So I read Listen by Dessen just to see what I think about romance. I gave this book 4 stars because I think for a romance it was really expansive in a way that it talked not just about the romance, but also about the main protagonist, her relationship with her parents, with her sisters. The sibling relationships were so beautifully done. Honestly, this is where all of the 4 stars lay. And also the friendship with this main love interest was really great. However, I kept expecting out of genre things to happen in this very specific genre. This is a romance, we all know what's gonna happen, and I just found myself expecting other things, which is ultimately how I figure out that romance is just not for me. So I'm glad I read this book, but I will not be reading anything more from Dessen or romance in general. Okay, the next book that I read is The Bad Beginnings by Lemony Snicket. This is a middle grade book, and I do not really like middle grade, and I don't really read them, but as I said, I wanted to try something new, and I also found a review that said that this book is more adult because of the theme. It's about these 3 children who lose their parents and then are adopted by this man who abuses them. So I thought, okay, it sounds pretty interesting and serious, I'll give it a try. However, the writing was so childish and simplistic and the plot was so boring that I ended up giving this 2 stars, and I will not be continuing with the series. If I've read this in like 3rd grade, I would probably like it. Right now, I just don't feel like I want to waste my time on these books that just do not challenge me in any way. Next up, we have a book about how to reduce our everyday plastic consumption in our lives, and it's called No More Plastic by Martin Dorey. It's a short book. It just gives some of the tips and tricks on how to reduce plastic usage. Now, I do consider myself a part of the zero waste movement, especially when I was in Europe. Here in Japan, it's really hard. Everything is in plastic, everything is wrapped in plastic, plastic is everywhere, and it's driving me insane. So I thought I would read this book just to make sure that I'm not missing anything and just to find some new advice on how to reduce my plastic consumption while I'm here and also when I get back. I'd recommend this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was pretty short. You can read it in an afternoon. So please do read it. It's not just for Earth, it's also for your own health with all of these microplastics, etc, etc. It's really great. So the next book is the one that I haven't encountered in a long time, which is young adult crime mystery novel, and it's called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jasckon. This book, I thought it was really fast-paced and fun to read. It definitely took me back to my middle school days when I was reading R.L. Stine novels, and this definitely reads like one of those novels. This means that it's pretty much far-fetched and transparent, and I guessed the overall twist pretty early on, so it wasn't really interesting to me. And I think if you're usually the type of person who reads crime and mystery novels, the adult genre would be better suited. So it's about this girl, Pip, who decides that she wants to start investigating a crime that happened 5 years before, when a girl was murdered and her boyfriend, who was accused of her murder, killed herself. Let's all just laugh at my grammar. Pip thinks that this boy did not kill this girl, so she goes on to investigate. Now, as I said, this book was fun, it was fast-paced, and if you're not a crime reader, or if you can't really guess about the plot very much, I do recommend this book. It's really fun. Next book we have is another romance novel, which is a 2020 release, and I buddy read this with a friend, and it's called Beach Read by Emily Henry. Now, I gave the romance genre another chance this month because Sarah Dessen is a pretty, 2005 type of romance, and this is 2020 release, so I wanted to ascertain that I'm really over the romance, and reading this I realized that I am, because there was nothing inherently wrong with this book. I just did not feel it. I gave it 4 stars. I think as a romance it was pretty great. It discusses some pretty important issues like inequality of sexes in publishing and writing, etc, etc. But yeah, this book is about this man and woman who are having troubles writing their novels. So the woman who is usually writing romance starts to write literary fiction, which this man usually writes literary fiction, and he starts to write romance, and they make a pact. Who finishes their novel first wins. Anyway, they fall in love and stuff happens. So as a romance, 4 stars, objectively. Subjectively, it's not for me, and I think with this I can finally close this chapter and go into other genres and find other genres that I like. The next book we have is a book about plant-based diet and how it helps against illnesses, and it is Your Body in Balance by Neal Barnard. This book was recommended in an email from Dr. Michael Greger, who wrote The Vegan Bible, How Not to Die. How Not to Die is my absolute favorite book in the entire universe, so of course I trust Dr. Michael Greger. I will read anything that he recommends. This book was brilliant. I gave it 5 stars as well. If you have problems with depression, menstrual cramps, any types of illness, just if you even don't have problems with that, helps you live a better life. I definitely recommend this book if you're into nutrition. Exercise is important, but diet is even more important. Next up we have a science fiction book, because this month I finally finished Star Wars. I finally watched the last one, and I was so into science fiction suddenly. It's been a long time since I've read any science fiction novels, so I decided to pick this one up, and it's Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This book is definitely young adult, not really adult. It doesn't have a lot of science, it doesn't have a lot of world building. I do really want science in my books, and this one didn't really have that. However, it did have beautiful character relationships, it discussed human nature, morality, all of that things, so I really liked it and gave it 4 stars. Ender's Game is about Ender, this boy who gets sent to this battle school. This battle school is basically a school for children where they are taught how to fight aliens, basically. And this book is definitely made me cry sometimes. It was bone-chilling. Some parts were so painful to read. It's definitely about growing up, about what is morally acceptable, about human nature, all those sort of stuff. I really liked that aspect, and I do recommend this book, especially if you're starting in the science fiction genre. I think this is pretty easy because the writing was really simple and there's no science in here, so it's basically not even science fiction all that much, as it is about human relationships. However, I will not be continuing with this series because the reviews go down, so I'm just happy that I read it, but after that I want to read something that's more science heavy and more world building. Next I read Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag. This is a short 70 pages essay kind of about war photography and how it influences us as we see other mutilated bodies and pain of others, basically, in these photos. I thought this was all over the place, honestly. I thought this touched upon a lot of subjects and never really finished them. It just kind of mentioned these subjects, but it didn't give me a satisfying conclusion. I wouldn't really recommend this for people who are interested in this topic. I think there must be some work that is more concise, so I think it gave me a good start. Some questions that I need answering, and now I just have to find the right literature to do this for me. Next I read Food Culture in Japan by Michael Ashkenazi. I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but this I read for my graduate thesis, and I think it's a really good introductory text to food culture in Japan. It starts with Jomon and Yaoi periods and goes on to present day and talks about tradition, and it's really interesting, and it gives you some idea where to start if you're researching this. But it's really meant, I think, for people who aren't really researchers, but just, you know, people who want to know more. So I do recommend this book if you are interested in food in Japan. Next book that I read was The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's one of the most actually well-known ones from self-help / success books. I thought this book had a great message of, you know, you gotta take small steps every day to achieve something big, and it's a pretty simple, you know, slight edge technique and pretty straightforward message. However, this book stretched this message out so much in such unnecessary ways. There were so many stories and detours. I also didn't like how the author oversimplified some of the things, explaining some of the things that were so self-evident. I get the message, I like the message, I do not like how this book was written. So if you're interested in this book, I definitely recommend you just read a summary of it, because this book is definitely unnecessarily long. Next I listened to We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I listened to this before bed and I just finished it in like one sitting. It's a pretty short 50-page essay about feminism, basically. I think this is definitely an essay that's easy to listen to, easy to read to. It's really short and everyone should read it. Next, I finished Food and Fantasy in Early Modern Japan by Eric Rath. As you can probably guess, it's another one for my graduate thesis. This one, on the other hand, is a pretty much in-depth account of the cookbooks in Edo period, so it's a really specific thing. It's definitely a book for researchers and academics. It's not a book if you want to know more. For me, it really helped me. This book really saves me. It gave me so much material that I needed. That's why I like it. And now it's time for you to tell me about your favorite reads of the month. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in one of my next videos. It might be a mid-year freakout tag, I'm still not sure, but I'm looking forward to it. And take care.